On this team called the Dev Hub. And we're based, well, I'm based out of New York, but the Dev Hub is split kind of across the country. So there's some of us in SF. Our team works with like Hearst-owned newspapers, like the San Francisco Chronicle and the Houston Chronicle, CT Insider, Times Union, and other papers around the country. So there's a bunch of us just like scattered around the states. So I've been at Hearst since 2022. And before that, I was on data graphics teams at the Wall Street Journal and NBC. So yeah.
That sounds wonderful. And then if you don't mind, I'd like each one of you to, and I can call on you to make it easier, to come off mute and share your name, your year, and your major. So I'll just go in order on my screen. At first, I have Aaron.
Good morning. My name is Aaron Watts. I'm a senior journalism major from Ellicott City, Maryland.
Wonderful. And then I have Elijah.
Hello, my name is Elijah Pinkney. I'm a junior sports journalism major, business administration minor from Prince George's County, Maryland.
Nice. And then Jermaine.
Hello, my name is Jermaine Beckett Jr. I'm a sports journalism senior business minor from Virginia Beach, Virginia.
Wonderful. And then Emmanuel.
Good morning, Mr. Williams, or good afternoon. My name is Emmanuel Lee. I'm a junior journalism major, hailing from New Jersey.
Jersey. Joshua.
Hey, my name is Joshua Vaughn. I'm a senior political science major, sports journalism minor on the pre-law track from Chicago.
Wonderful. And then Isaiah.
Good afternoon. I'm Isaiah Dubose, a sophomore, journalism and Spanish double major from Lithonia, Georgia.
And then Broderick with a B.
Good afternoon. My name is Broderick Houston. I'm a junior sports journalism major, entrepreneurship minor from Dallas, Texas.
Nice. And I have Elijah with an A. If you want to come off mute, Elijah. Okay. All right, so we're going to move on to Ian.
Good afternoon, Mr. Williams. My name is Ian Cheyenne, and I'm a junior journalism major from Silver Spring, Maryland, with a minor in theater and performance.
Nice. And then the last one we have is Roderick with an R.
How you guys doing? My name is Roderick with an R. I'm from Waldorf, Maryland. I'm a communication major and I'm a senior.
Wonderful. With that said, I would like to turn it back to Andrew. And remember that the topic is data journalism. And so I think that really you can think about data as a part of journalism and the stories that we tell. But I'm really interested in hearing what Andrew has to say what data looks like. Because when we think of data, we think of figures, maybe numbers, maybe graphs, and it is all of that. But data journalism and data visualization is so much more. So this might be something that you'd be interested in learning to either work on your career or it be just influenced and incorporated into the work that you do. It's makes the work better, in my opinion, which is why I asked Andrew. So Andrew, why don't you share with us what you have?
Yeah, sure. I'll share my screen
Mhm.
with the presentation.
Perfect. We can see your screen.
Okay. So yeah, so there are a lot of different types of visual journalists. So you'll find a couple of these in newsroom. So photo, video journalists, graphic designers, page designers, print designers, and there's also graphics reporters. So it's some of what I do. Some of the roles will be a mixture of all these things, especially in a smaller newsroom. So at NBC, for example, I was a data visualization and multimedia producer. So I was handling data, graphics, and photo requests. And so some common types of viz include graphs and charts. So there's things like line charts and bar charts. And then there's also static and interactive maps. Quizzes are really popular and other interactive tools. And lately we've seen a lot of AR, VR, and 3D also entering the space. And then of course AI. We've been integrating a lot of AI into our work also. Um, and so when it comes to data journalism, what exactly is data journalism? Data journalism is journalism that gathers, organizes, and analyzes data for storytelling purposes. So there are lots of different types of reporters that use data journalism, not just a data reporter. So we have investigative reporters, people that make graphics, graphics reporters, data reporters, of course, and then business reporters, and even sports reporters use a lot of data in their reporting. So there's varying levels of data journalism. So it could be anything from an Excel spreadsheet to Python and Pandas data analysis. So you can get more advanced depending on your role and like what you do in a newsroom. But data can be found in plenty of different roles. So it could be useful even if you're not interested in being a data journalist or a data engineer or anything like that. So yeah, data can come in several different forms. In production, a data set will usually be something like a CSV file. So a CSV file looks a lot like a spreadsheet, except for it's more of an open source file format, so you don't need Excel to open it. And it's also able to be used in programs like Python, which a lot of data journalists use. Um, but oftentimes the data that you'll get is messy. So you'll have to maybe scrape it from a website, or you can get paper records through something like a FOIA request. Uh, a lot of FOIA requests go through the police. So if you need police records, um, like arrest records or things like that, you can file a FOIA request and get those records. But the thing is, they'll usually come back in paper, then you can manually clean them and convert them into something usable, like a digital data set. Um, and data can be a lot of different things outside of just numbers and text. I think that's what people usually think of when they think of data, but data can also be location and geodata and can be used for things like mapping. Speeches can become data visualization projects, so things like text analysis. A lot of news orgs also go through political speeches and highlight claims with annotations to add context or points of conflict to kind of hold them accountable. So this kind of turns that regular speech transcript into a visual interactive story. Um, so pretty much everything is data. So that's why it's really important. Um, Another thing is that journalism has become more and more reliant on data and visuals to make our case. So data journalism just makes our stories a bit stronger and more persuasive for readers. Most newsrooms have something called an audience development team or an SEO team, and stories with interactives and data viz also tend to have higher read-through rates and retention when looking at internal analytics. So including data in your stories can make them a lot more popular. It helps a lot on Twitter. You'll usually see data stories being featured a lot on social media and being shared around. Um, they just hold reader attention better and are great for trying to explain and walk readers through topics that might be more complex. So that's something that visuals can do that they're really, really good at. That show, don't tell approach. Graphics are very useful when trying to talk through topics that might be difficult to explain through just text. So sometimes it's better to show rather than tell, is what we say. So we see a lot of that with storytelling. Things like storytelling merge the copy with graphics, and then the graphics can change as readers scroll through the page. We'll also explore that a bit more. And I have a couple of examples set up that we can walk through. But just to wrap this section up, data and visual journalism can do like several different things for you as a reporter. They allow you to fact check public figures, um, helps you keep your audience better engaged. You can also get input from them through things like polls and surveys, so you can make data sets from your own audience. And then you can analyze and show that data in a story. You give your audience new insights with complex topics, with explainer graphics. It makes you more persuasive, so your points are much more solid when you have actual data behind them. And it allows you to tailor stories and experiences. So, for example, here on the Dev Hub, like as I mentioned, we can publish a similar story for the SF Chronicle and the Houston Chronicle, but we can change the focus of the graphics for each paper. So we call that localization. So we have like a map that originally was loaded on San Francisco and focused on San Francisco and the whole story. was more tailored towards San Francisco, but if we wanted to port it to Houston Chronicle, we can change where the map loads so it lands on Houston instead, and the data is more like focused on Houston instead. It's really easy to do with the national data set, but can also be done with like local data also if we can get similar data for both of those markets. And so are there any questions before we hop into some examples?
I actually have a question. So you said that you can use AR and VR. What's the difference?
So AR is augmented reality, and then VR is virtual reality. And so augmented reality, you see that a lot with phones. Like if you go into the Amazon app, there sometimes allows you to see like what something will look like inside of your home by pointing your camera at it. So you don't need any like special glasses or anything to see that. VR are like headsets that they have, like the Apple Vision Pro was probably the biggest VR headset that launched this year. Um, there's been a lot of integration of that recently, especially with like 3D projects. We've seen that a lot with the New York Times. They have like VR versions of some of their stories that you can see. Like if they make a like 3D diagram of something, you can put on your VR headset and it could be like they could show you what like a fire looked like. I think they did that with um, a wildfire before, where you could see how, the process of how wildfire sparks and how it devastates a region. Um, and you can it kind of immerses you in the world that they're trying to build around you. So yeah, those are becoming increasingly popular. We've done some 3D stories, but nothing like focused with like a headset or that requires external technologies like that.
Oh, that's a great example, very visual example. I can't imagine what it would feel like to put on a headset and feel like I'm in the middle of a wildfire. Yeah.
Yeah, wildfires. And then I think they did one with a chapel burning, like the process around that. So yeah, there are some very good uses for that in journalism. But yeah, I think the technology is like it requires this external tech, whereas AR is a bit more accessible, I think.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, were there any other questions? Okay. Cool. So here on the Dev Hub at Hearst, we work with several of our local newspapers. We help them basically with advanced visual storytelling projects. We also make graphic templates so that regular reporters can do more complex data visualization without code. There are a bunch of tools that we have that we don't need to necessarily use code for. And I'm going to share those later toward the end. But there's tools like Data Wrapper and Flourish that people can make visualizations and graphics without having to do any code. And so we recently added an AI team to our division, and they're focused on reader-facing AI bots and internal tools that make journalists' jobs easier. And one of those internal tools, for example, allows reporters to automatically track a public meeting, and then transcribes it for them. And if they have any selected keywords that they want to be like highlighted or looked out for during the meeting, the reporter will get an email from the bot. So that kind of eliminates a lot of the work that they need to do, like manually going down to a school board meeting or a city council meeting, or like having to take notes and then go home and transcribe everything themselves. The bot can pull it from the stream, the video stream, and it helps them with their work. And then currently our team is working on elections projects like finalizing live results pages for the upcoming election. We're updating our campaign finance tool. We have a campaign finance tracker that I'll show you all. And so, yeah, these projects I'm about to show, I worked on most of them. So if you have any questions, you can just interject, or if you want to know how we did something in particular, happy to go through that also. So I'll move into some of the projects that we have here. So this is a project that we internally call EV Road Trip, but it's a project that handles range anxiety for electric vehicles. So most trips that people take are short and local, but a lot of research shows that people are concerned with um, road trips and long trips with electric vehicles. They're concerned that they won't be able to take those long trips across the country or like 2 and 3 hour trips in an EV without getting stranded. So like the goal of this tool was to help them decide if an EV is right for them. Most people will be fine doing like daily tasks and going to work and going home. But this compares EVs to gas cars through several different metrics. So range, trip price, time spent. And we have some common sample trips tailored here. So you can just click the random trip button. It'll show you trips that are very common in the area. So we've tailored these to each newspaper. So there's a Houston version of the story. There's a version for people in Albany. There's a version for people in San Antonio. And these trips are different for everyone. We also have a national version of this that we've made for our Hearst TV division. So they've used this on air also. And then we have gas prices here. These update daily. So I have a scraper running. It pulls in the average gas price in the area. So you can get an idea of what the trip will cost. And then our charging stations are updated quarterly. So the charging stations on the map here, the green dots. And then the EV lineup here, so you can switch vehicles. This is updated yearly, and we update it with the most popular vehicles based on sales. So just so that it stays fresh, and readers can come back and they can see like how the latest vehicles fare compared to a gas vehicle, the average gas vehicle. And you can see how long it will take to complete the trip in a EV versus in a gas vehicle. And so for this project, we used Mapbox, the directions API, and then EV routing API. So there's two APIs running in the background here. And there's some D3 also. And that's just like a JavaScript library that's used pretty commonly with graphics reporters and data journalists. And these cars were drawn in Illustrator. So there's little illustrations that we put here of each car. And you can reroute the vehicle and you can see what it will look like in a different car. So this is what it looked like in a Model Y. The Ford F-150, it's an EV that was made by Ford, but it's a pickup truck. So it's kind of very like resource intensive. So trips typically take longer in this larger vehicle and the range isn't as great. And so this is one of the projects that we worked on that was very popular, especially in SF because of their tax credits. So yeah, just an example of how you can use tools to help readers make decisions in their personal lives and make lives easier for them. Lunar Lander is what we're calling this one internally. So this is a 3D focus storytelling project. So this is showing how a Texas-based company became the first commercial company to successfully land on the moon. And the US hadn't landed on the moon in 50 years before this. So we broke down what makes landing on the moon so hard. And we used 3D models and storytelling diagrams. You can see all kinds of people have crashed trying to land on the moon. And you can see where the US has landed and other countries have landed based on the flags. You can see the dates when you hover over it also. You can see which countries have done a soft landing on the moon. So a soft landing is when you land on the moon and your lander isn't destroyed. So a lot of the times when people land on the moon, it's whatever they used to land on the moon is inoperable, but technically it made it to the moon. So very few countries have actually done a soft landing on the moon. And these are just in order of like the countries that have done it before. And then this is just a timeline of updating moon missions. So we have moon missions lined up. NASA has a calendar of when different countries are going to the moon. And we've just visualized that with countries and flags. So you can kind of see like what the span is for over like the next decade. And then here we have the actual lander from Intuitive Machines, which is the country that launched out of Houston. This story is pretty unique because the Houston Chronicle is based where NASA is. So they have a space reporter that we worked with. She was able to write the copy for us. So the copy here on the side is her written words, and we took the diagram from Intuitive Machine and broke it down, made it simple to understand how the lander is going to take off, separate from the rocket, and circle the moon. So it's going to do rotations around the moon before finally actually landing. We want to visualize that process of how it actually gets to the moon. And then once it is ready to land, we did some 3D modeling to show the landing process of the Nova C.
Oh, this is pretty cool.
Yeah, so just one of those examples of how we can show and not tell, especially with like more complex topics like rocket science. So yeah, it's a great way to tell stories and work with like reporters that are unique to us because a lot of newsrooms don't have a space reporter. That's pretty unique for Houston to be able to do the story and work with intuitive machines on their landing, their successful landing, because most landings fail. Was a pretty cool experience. Um, and so yeah, for that one, I think we use D3 and HTML, Illustrator, and Blender. And Blender is an open source tool for creating 3D graphics. So those are all free. Only Illustrator costs money, and I believe that you can probably get that through Morehouse or get an educational discount. It's in a part of the Adobe Creative Cloud. So you can experiment with that.
How long did
The
it take you for that one, that story about, rocket science, from ideation to completion of what somebody actually engaging with this? How long did it take the team to create this? And then also, I know that you said the reporter wrote the copy that we see. So who's expected to gather this data?
so we got a lot of the information. We worked directly with the company. So we were working with them last year around this time actually. And they were set to take off and land in December of that year. But they kept pushing it back. And while they were pushing it back, another company tried to leapfrog them and land on the moon before them to beat them. But they ended up like their rocket ended up exploding. So Nova Sea and Intuitive Machines still became the first commercial company to make that landing. So I would say this took about 3 to 4 months in total. A lot of it was because of them pushing the timeline back, but it's because they didn't want to crash because it's so common to crash on the moon, especially the part of the moon that they were trying to land on. Um, so yeah, I'd say it took about 3 to 4 months. We gathered the data from a variety of sources, but a lot of the information, like the scrolly telling here, this came directly from the company. We were in contact with them. They adjusted their flight path a few times, so this path that they had changed. And so we adjusted the graphics to reflect the changes that they made. Um, they adjusted their flight path so that they wouldn't crash and explode like the other company that tried to beat them to the moon. Um, so yeah, it's pretty fluid, the timeline for a story like this. But yeah, and we also updated it once they actually land. Once it landed on the moon, they did manage a soft landing, but it fell over. So they weren't able to it wasn't able to go and finish out its mission of like I think they had like something
Oh,
that was going to be like roving the moon. Um, but it did make that soft landing. It just fell over once it reached the moon.
nice. It's a beautiful example.
And then we also do some stuff with real-time data. So this story here, we call it the story FAA. It's a flight tracker. It's an airport tracker also. So this story was in response to the Southwest meltdown a few years ago. So during the holiday season, about 2 years ago, Southwest had a bunch of severe delays and cancellations that caused like a mass delay effect across a bunch of different airports. So people got stranded during the holiday season. Their flights got canceled. I'm sure some of you might have been involved in that. Atlanta has, I think, one of the largest airports, or if not the largest airport in the world. They have a lot of traffic. And so um, this story is an analysis of data over a 5 year span. And so it's the visualizations of flights out of airports near local newspapers. So we have multiple versions of the story and they're all tailored to our local newspapers. So the graphics here change. This story is for Times Union and their focus on New York. So these are all New York airports. Um, and then we also have the experience change with a navigation bar that pops up here. So this bar follows you around the story and you can highlight the airport and airline that you're interested in. So you can see its track record at a specific airport. And then at the top, we have this hourly tracker. So this data is updating in real time. So you can see if like the airport that you're about to go to is having a bunch of issues with delays and cancellations. And then our newsrooms also get a Slack alert if these percentages drop below a certain point. So they'll know that something's going on at their airport. We recently saw heavy use of this during the CrowdStrike meltdown this summer that caused a mass delay and a meltdown also. And I think Delta is currently suing CrowdStrike for what happened because they lost millions of dollars when that happened. Um, so yeah, you can come here and you can switch to, say you want to go to JFK, it'll highlight and all the data on the story will change based on your selections here. And you want to fly Delta, so it'll bring Delta to the top and you'll see what it looks like at JFK, their track record, how often it was delayed, if there are any delays over 2 hours, because a delay is technically 15 minutes or more. You can see how often it's canceled. Typically, Delta is pretty good. You can see how it ranks against the other top airlines at an airport. And you can see what it looks like over that 5 year span. So this heat map will tell you like when it's the most healthy. Typically, you see like a lot of delays and cancellations around the holidays when it's busier. So you can get a better idea of like when you want to fly. And then we have these gauges here that just tell you how reliable the most frequently traveled airlines are at JFK. So if you have an airline that's your favorite, you can see how it compares to the other big airlines there. You can see how it compares to other airports at in your area. So this is what Delta looks like at all of the New York City airports. So you can pick the best one for you. And you can see how it falls compared to like every airline that we have. There's a ton of different airlines you can choose from. We got this data from FlightAware, and then the real-time data at the top is from a company called Air Labs. So FlightAware gave us this data for free. So you can also go to a company and ask them if you're a news organization or a journalist. They'll usually give it to you for free. They're usually happy to help reporters, and also it's good for their brand recognition also to have their name attached to a story like this that's getting revisited repeatedly over and over again and updated. So sometimes they won't even charge you for data sets like this. And so, yeah, it's sometimes good to just reach out and ask. So then you won't have to spend your newsroom's money, and you can still get to do a pretty cool story. Um, this shows you just how long the average delay is with when you're flying Delta at your selected airport. And so those changes based on the airline that you choose. So say you wanted to fly, I don't know, Jazz Aviation, you can see like what the average delay is for this flight at JFK. You can see it through different years. This isn't a big airline, so they may not have any. Let's try LaGuardia, American, and then you can scroll through here. And you can see that their average delay time is between 45 to 60 minutes. So you know that going in. And then you can also use things like data analysis for doing softer stories. So this analysis of Taylor Swift's music and her set list for her Eras tour. This is a good example of how data analysis can be used to tell music stories and stories focused on arts and culture. Data stories don't always need to be serious. So this is like a very popular story because the tour was very popular. Her Swifties got a hold of the story and shared it all over Twitter and Reddit. So that made up like a bunch of the page views for this story. But basically, this consolidates all of her biggest hits and says whether or not they're on the tour, so you can see the set list, what era they came from, and then she had a bunch of surprise songs, and you can see when she performed them. This is the graphic that I worked on here. This is a radial bar chart, and it consolidates all of her top 20 hits and determines whether or not they're on the tour, if they're a surprise song, or if they were left off the tour. I think the only like one of her like top 5 songs that was left off lately, like after everything was done, was Me. She says she's hated that song, and I guess it's true because she didn't perform it at all. She says she regrets performing it and like making that song. So it's not surprising to see that she didn't want to do that one, even though it was the top 5 hit for her. We also did some analysis of where we did analysis of basically, we got a hold of a data set that shows her set list throughout her entire career. We found the Love Story was played the most often. So she's played this song over 500 times. So you can see how data can break that down and make a story more interesting around arts and culture also, especially in terms of like things like Billboard. Billboard charts are really popular now. People, if you do scan words on social media, you can bring data to those. You can also use it for things like explainers and infographics. So talked a little bit about that earlier of how you can break down really complex topics. So this is an explainer infographic describing the total solar eclipse. So we had the solar eclipse back in April. And this is just showing why they're so rare and how a solar eclipse works. So as you scroll through the story, it has this kind of tarot card um, design, and these were drawn in Illustrator with AI HTML. And it can kind of break down this topic and show how solar eclipse works. We also have a map at the bottom of the story that's interactive that shows all the future total solar eclipse going through like the next century. Uh, so yeah, this style is really cool. This was done by an illustrator on our team. She's left, but she is very good at drawing art. So this style, this tarot card astrology style was pretty popular. Made the story really come together. But yeah, the explanation of what a total solar eclipse is and why it's so important that you get to see it. And then campaign finance. So this story, we use a lot of D3 and React, and then Python for the data analysis. So we have these key race modules here at the top. Basically, what this story does is track donations and expenses and reserves for political candidates. So this is really important for the election. So you can kind of get an idea of where candidates are coming from and where they're getting all their money from, and basically who owns a lot of this candidate's funding. And this is localized for each paper with local races. So this one is for SF. So at the top here, they have a pretty big mayoral race. We worked with the SF politics team and reporters in their local markets so that they could go through and write like a blurb for each of these key races that they wanted to focus on. And then down below, we break down the money that they've received and the money that they spent. And then we have, of course, presidential race here also. And races that are national get this nice tree map here, and it breaks down basically like who their top contributors are. So people that these are not the companies themselves contributing, but people that work at the company. So people that worked at Google here have contributed almost $3 million to Kamala. And you can switch it and see where Trump is getting most of his funding from. People from the Army, people from the Department of Defense donate a lot to Trump. You can also see it through
How
the
with Kamala Harris, it's a lot of tech.
yeah, she gets a lot of money from tech, and I think it's because she was pretty heavily involved in SF for a long time. Um, and so we also have a story that I'm going to show in a bit that focuses on Kamala, and the Chronicle has been reporting on Kamala for a very long time, I believe like 25 years or something like that, because she's been in California, she's been a politician, she was the DA. So they've been covering her for a while. So her footprint in California and getting bunch of money from people working in Silicon Valley, it really does track. But yeah, she also gets a bunch of money from retired people and of course democratic and liberal causes, um, people working in education. Trump gets most of his money from retired people, so you can see that he skews much older. And then this bar here will track how much of these contributions that you see here make up their total donations. And Kamala has almost $1 billion in donations, so she's not really hurting for money. And then below, we also do the similar things for house house races that are key races, so you can see the breakdown for those also. Um, and the markets can control what goes up at the top there. But then we also have these tables here, so you can just see the funding for all candidates, and then we have the candidates that dropped out still listed here, but grayed out, so you can see how their funding compares. Same with the Senate race, but with our Senate races, we float the markets state to the top. So California for the SF Chronicle is floated to the top because that's what people are here to see. But if they want to see something else, they can also go through and see that also. We update this monthly with FEC filings. This month there's actually 3 filings because of the end of the election coming up. So this will be updated one more time this month before the election. So yeah, it's one of those quality of life tools that readers can use to kind of inform their decisions where people are getting money from. And also it's great because we got to work with the politics team. So they're basically getting to speak on their beat. This is their expertise. They have to have their voice to the data. It's nice to have their face and their expertise attached to our analysis. Yeah, so are there any questions so far on anything?
Yeah, does anyone have any thoughts or questions? I thought that was a great example of Taylor Swift for Ian. Ian is very into the arts and entertainment. So I was very pleased that you showed something that wasn't either politics or hard news, but softer.
Yeah, yeah. I think people when people think of data, they think of like they always think of politics or they think of elections or some like crazy like investigative story. But sometimes you can add data to like your softer stories, like your arts and culture. You can help elevate a story that way too. Yeah, it gave the Swifties a lot of ammunition to use and whatever they do on Twitter. Um, so it works out for the newsroom also. Uh, and then I guess this is another political story that we have here. We have these voter guides for each of our markets. So this allows readers to decide who they're voting for before they go in and vote, with added context from politics teams. So we have political reporters writing blurbs for each of the candidates here. You can go through and you can mark a candidate and you can save it and you can print all of your choices out. And this has everything for presidential down to like local elections too, and down to propositions also. And this is localized for each of our papers. So it has a bunch of context here. So a lot of the time people will go into the booth, they only know who the top names are for like president and maybe Senate and House, but they don't know anything about their local elections. They don't know who they're picking for judge. This breaks down the track record with context from our experts, our expert political reporters. So you can get an idea of who these people are before you go in and vote. And you can go through and check all these off, and you can go through at the bottom and you can print it off. There's also a Spanish speaking version of this. So there's this version here that we've made in Spanish just for the Houston Chronicle. So this tailors to like the large Spanish speaking population. So that's a good way to target readers, like to better serve your audience because there is that large population of people in Texas and Houston that don't speak English. This is really interesting because we translated this with AI first, and we fact checked and edited it with a native speaker. So this made it a lot easier to do this story in multiple languages. So that's like another use of AI. We're very cautious about using front-facing AI. So everything that we do has to be fact-checked and edited by a native speaker, but it's have AI do that translation and then someone else edit it, then someone like going through and typing and writing it all out themselves. Um, so yeah, being able to better serve our newsrooms, uh, another tool that's very useful, quality of life. I think here at the bottom, yeah, you can email these selections to yourself. You can print them, you can copy them. You take it to the polls with you. Chatbot. So this is one of our first reader-facing bots. So as I mentioned, our team recently added an AI division to the Dev Hub. So this is some of the stuff that they do, and that they're looking to do in the future. This is one of the first AI chatbots that was reader-facing. So this bot is trained on restaurant recommendations and reviews from the SF Chronicle going back several years. So the SF Chronicle has a team that has thousands of reviews. They've reviewed a bunch of restaurants from the Bay Area, and this bot is trained on all those reviews. So you can ask it if you're looking for, like, we have like any of these options here. You can go in and type in your own. Um, it'll print a recommendation for you, and we'll point you to the articles that are relevant. So yeah, let's get those.
This one's my favorite by far.
Yeah, you don't know what you want, you don't know what you're trying to eat. This is a great way to get some recommendations, and it will link you to the articles too, so you can read the full thing. Um, yeah, and I think they usually use GPT. So GPT is the large language model that powers ChatGPT. So it's just like the more raw version of ChatGPT powering this. I think they use GPT 4.0, but there's like a new version. every couple of months. The front end was built by one of our front end developers, and the illustrations were drawn in Illustrator. Um, so yeah, that was a good use of AI there. We also have this one. This is a newer one that recently came out. This is trained on Kamala Harris. So we've been covering Kamala Harris for about 25, 30 years now. And so this news assistant is trained on all those articles that have been written about her in the SF Chronicle. So there's all these sample questions here. Um, these like scrolling ones change pretty often. So want to know where Kamala Harris gets her favorite burrito? You can come here. Um, it'll tell you. You can ask other questions to it, and there's a bunch of guardrails around there. So what we see a lot with these like front-facing AI projects is that people will come in and they'll ask the bot silly questions about um like where they can get like the nuclear launch codes or something like that. We don't want the bot to respond to things that are off topic, so there are guardrails that prevents it from actually delivering an answer. Or if they ask something inappropriate, it won't answer or will redirect them. Um, so yeah, it's very much in the scope of Kamala Harris, and it updates with all the articles that are written. So if Kamala does something and as the Chronicle reports on it, the bot will be trained with a new article and be able to answer that pretty quickly. And then we also have this like frequently asked questions section down here. So you can go through and things that are highlighted in green, you can ask the bot and get like a um, more extrapolated answer. So yeah, this is a good AI tool that saw a lot of use. Um,
So glad to see you all put guardrails on that because that could go all kinds of ways.
yeah, we've seen some bots from other newsrooms that have been jailbroken and they said some pretty crazy things, and people love to like take screenshots and share them of like what they got and you're about to say.
Yeah.
So yeah, having this was tested very thoroughly by the SF Chronicle, our team, and legal, of course, legal with AI is pretty. Most legal teams will want to review any AI projects, especially front-facing ones. So it was kind of a big deal. One of the things that we've seen with some other newsrooms is that they've had their like articles taken by news aggregators like MSN, and they have their own AI integrated into their, I guess, CMS. And it's done some really inappropriate things with stories. Like I think MSN took a story from The Guardian and they had their AI poll bot create a survey inside of the article, and the survey was asking questions about how they think the subject of the story died, like who killed her. Do you think it was her mom or her boyfriend? It was like very insensitive. Um, we want to make sure that things like that don't happen. So the guardrails are really important. Making sure that people are fact checking before they publish things that they've gotten with AI. That includes like the internal bots that we have, like the one that transcribes meetings and sends notifications. They always have to make sure that that is actually what was said during the meeting before they go and publish whatever the bot sent them. Because bots are known to hallucinate, they can be jailbroken, and they can get things wrong also. So making sure that we drive that point home to our reporters and people that aren't as technical is a top priority for that team. Yeah, and then I'll share these. I just have all these here and they're linked here. So I'll share this with Nicole so you'll have access to the examples and the resources that I'm going to show at the end. But are there any questions so far?
I was just gonna say, I feel like it is super interesting because it's like the only way that you can marginally track people's opinions. So I feel like, I don't know, I just feel like when it comes to news stories, it's like data plays a super important role because if that news story is all our opinion, then it's like no one's ever gonna really have anything else to like hold up against it, if that makes sense. So I feel like in a way, data kind of keeps us accountable for a lot of the stories that we tell. And it kind of like not only that, but it also just it's honestly the heart of the stories that we tell too at the same time. If that makes sense.
That's
Yeah, I
great.
think it can really strengthen a story and turn a story from opinion to more of a factual analysis for sure.
That's a great thought. I love that, Ian. Thank you for sharing.
Absolutely.
And any other thoughts? Okay, so yeah, I'm just gonna walk through some of the free tools that are out there. These will allow you to do basically your own visualizations without having to do any coding. So I'm also gonna walk through some of the more complex tools that data journalists use toward the end here. We have image sliders. So you can do image sliders with tools like Juxtapose from Nightlab. I'll show demonstrations of these also, but these are great for showing before and afters with things like satellite images. um, you can do data breakdowns using tables and bar charts. So tools like Data Wrapper or Flourish. Those two websites allow you to upload or paste a data set and you pick your desired chart from a list of options. They're both pretty commonly used in newsrooms also. So picking up Data Wrapper or Flourish is pretty easy and it makes you a lot more popular in a newsroom if you can do a simple chart using those tools. They're used for breaking stories a lot and for quick turn news stories. So um, just having that in your toolkit. This is another example of a data wrapper chart. This time it's using a line chart and it visualizes historical data on college tuition. Timelines are also popular. So this is another tool from the Night Lab. Allows you to easily make interactive timelines and line charts, and you can also annotate them. The Night Lab has a bunch of free tools and templates for data and visual storytelling. See if I can pull this up now. So data wrapper here, link these. I think Night Lab here, Juxtapose. So Juxtapose is the one that allows you to do these image sliders here. So you might have seen these in news articles. It can show you like the how something has changed over time or if there's like devastation. You might have seen a lot of these with things like the Maui wildfire. Um, to see the scope of like what actually happened in the area. This is nice because you don't need any coding here. You put an image link here, put an image link there, and it'll pop out a preview for you and some embed code. These are used pretty often in newsrooms. You'll see these in the Times. You can make a GIF out of it. It's an easy way to add interactivity to a story. Some newsrooms also have their own version of the slider template, so you might not need to use the external version. Then some data sources here. So these are some national and local data sources that you can use to find data for your stories. The Morehouse Common data set here, for example, you can get data on enrollment, transfers, class sizes, and more. Then there's also these two data sources, so federal data and city data can come from either of these. You can also use things like census data. All that is available for free online. I think I mentioned earlier, you can do FOIAs to government agencies if you want to get data from like a police department, or if you want to get data from, I think you can also do FOIA the FBI. I think pretty much everything is up for FOIA. You have to be very specific when you do a FOIA request though, because they'll find any reason to deny your FOIA. And FOIAs can take a long time to get back to you. You all are based in Georgia and you're close to Florida. Florida has some of the quickest FOIAs and the easiest FOIAs to file. They're pretty good with public data, Florida. So getting data through Florida is kind of a dream for a lot of journalists. So that is that. Yeah, these tools are all free. So, and they're all pretty easy to use. They don't involve any coding or very minimal coding. So you might need to take the embed code. And then I want to also share these more advanced tools. Um, these are tools that we use in the industry that may require some additional coding knowledge, but I just want to include them here because a lot of people aren't sure of what they should be looking to learn for data and visualization positions in a newsroom. So you'll see these all the time on things like job listings. People are looking for these internally also. A major one here is D3. So this is a JavaScript library and it's used to make custom graphics. It is free, but it's a pretty big learning curve. Jonathan Soma is a professor at Columbia, and he's director of the Data Journalism Master's program there, and he has a bunch of free tutorials on YouTube and online. He runs a site and provides a lot of resources for learning D3 and HTML. This is a plugin for Illustrator, and it's created by the New York Times, and it basically takes an artboard you're familiar with Illustrator, it takes the stuff that you put on the board and converts it into HTML. Most newsrooms have their own versions or their own fork of HTML so that it works with their CMS. HTML is free. Illustrator isn't, but I think you can usually get it for free or discounted through your school. Um, Svelte and React, these are JavaScript libraries also, but these are more of a backend library. So most graphics teams will build graphics in one or the other. We use React here at Hearst. New York Times uses Svelte in a lot of their projects. These are both free also. Um, Blender, it's a free 3D modeling software. So we use that in the Lunar Lander project where we were showing how the company landed on the moon. Um, so that's a free modeling software. Modeling softwares are usually really expensive. So Blender being free and open source is a pretty big win. Unity is a game engine, and that will allow you to take those 3D models that you create in something like Blender and create games or VR environments out of them. Both are pretty complex, but there's a lot of tutorials on YouTube that can show you how to make pretty much anything. And I know like for the Neuraliner project, we used a lot of tutorials for 3D modeling the actual lander that was used. Mapbox here in the mapping section. So Mapbox is unique and different. It used to be the go-to tool for interactive news maps, but that's changed a lot in the last 2 years or so. So Mapbox is very expensive, even for like a big company. They service a lot of companies that are not newsrooms, so they're not focused on news. I think that's why their price is so exorbitant. You'll see Mapbox and actually a lot of EVs now and like cars use Mapbox for their route for like their GPS and routing. So they have contracts with like a lot of big companies. So they're very expensive, but they didn't used to be so. But a lot of newsrooms have switched to Map Libre, which is basically a free version of the same thing. I think their source code, like the person that worked on the source code for Mapbox and Map Libre, are the same team. So a lot of the things that work in Mapbox work in Map Libre also. I think the joke is that Mapbox and a story made people worried about going viral because it would inflate the cost, the page load, because they charge by like each load of the page, so it's very easy to go over. And you don't want to be worried about your story doing well. So Map Libre being open source and free is a godsend. The only thing is that Mapbox has a lot of APIs, like the ones used in our EV routing project that use Mapbox's EV routing API and their directions API. And so those APIs that they have are proprietary and they can't be used outside of Mapbox for legal reasons. So just be aware of that. But most of the time, Map Libre is the one you want to go with. It's free. QGIS is great. It's an open source tool for creating static maps. So those are maps that don't zoom or move, but you might want a static map over an interactive one if you want to add like a lot of detail or stylization to a map. And then the last two here, Python and R. These are both just coding languages used for data analysis. So you can do most data analysis in Excel or Google Sheets. There are a lot of data reporters and investigative reporters that don't do any coding at all. They just use Excel or they use Google Sheets. I think Google Sheets is very popular. So you don't need to know either of these really, unless you want to like get really deep into data analysis or do like large analysis on a data set. You only need to know one of these. So you don't need to know both Python and R. Most people have a preference. I personally use Python. I think it's a more useful language to learn. R is mostly used by people working with data, but Python has a bunch of uses outside of data analysis. So that's used in AI web scraping also. Um, so I would recommend Python first. Also, it's I think there's a bit more resources for learning it. Um, and then Pandas is a library for analyzing and cleaning data in Python. So those are all free. Yeah, and that's all from me. I hope that was useful. I hope that helped demystify data and visual journalism. Um, any last questions? Happy to answer anything about Hearst, newspapers, NBC, data.
All the things, right? Are you willing to I'm not sure if this is linked or if this is like a PowerPoint or something, but are you willing to share the presentation so that we could post it in our Slack channel?
Yeah, I'll send it over to you.
Okay, wonderful. I thought that was great, wonderful, recent, very relevant examples. So I feel like you touched from food to politics to um, like space, Taylor Swift. It was great. And even flying, which it can be, it's great to have a strategy to figure out what airline it takes. So I'm not sitting there in the airport.
Oh, it's stressful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I want to make sure, are there any thoughts or questions? I'm assuming Ian's hand is up from before because I see that up, but okay. All right. Well, you'll have the information as far as to reach out to Andrew if you have any further questions. I thought that was wonderful. I'm going to stop recording really quickly if I can.
Yeah. I added multiple emails here. In case any questions come up, the first